Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last part, we came up here to the top of Mount Chimney and fought off Team Aqua for now. And then now our next objective is to climb down the side of the volcano towards our next active town. Worth noting though, while Lavaridge town, as that lady just said, is our destination, you actively can't head back down through the cable car at this point, I believe, but in the case you need to heal for whatever reason, that old lady is now there. The reason I actively went back there is because I thought I could actively buy an item from her at this point that I've already talked about in the LP. But no, you actively can't do that, I think, until after you take care of the gym in Lavaridge. For right now, welcome to the Jagged Pass. This is a little bit of a multi-layered area, and I really recommend you actively have the acro bike here. As the thing is, while there are pieces of sand you can fall down and climb back up using the mock bike, it's easiest to get back from the bottom to the top should you ever need to using the acro bike and its jumping to get up the stones. Off the top of my head, I think like 4 items require the acro bike here, but only one of them is super worth it, and that's a TM we'll be grabbing in a few moments. For instance, I think what's down here where I'm about to go is just a super repel, which, hey, useful if you're using repels. For me, it's kind of worthless, but oh well. As for the TM we just got, though, Flame Charge, that's a decently low power fire type move. But the big thing about it is that it guarantees raising its user's speed stat by a single stage. So if you're going in for a potentially long fight, using that once or twice early on, even if it does lower damage, can really help change the tide of turns later on. I've used that decently regularly and been pleased with it. Hey, nice. Rock Polish is a move I probably could have used in better instances here and again in retrospect. That is a rock type move that boosts the speed stage of the user by 2, which opening up with that with slower Pokemon that can learn it can actively be a game changer again. But since I tend to, in main campaign, only really rely on damage dealing moves, it's one I tend to ignore. Speaking of Pokemon I kind of tend to ignore, honestly, this is Graveler. This evolves from Geodude at level 25. Rock ground type, so it is weak to fighting, ground, steel, water, grass, and ice, but immune to electric. Notably, water and grass are 4 times weaknesses. Graveler's got a good physical attack stat, and I want to say a moveset that can back that up. And a really good physical defense stats, but the rest of its stats, be it HP, defenses, or speed, are really low to the point where I don't really find it worth using. If you want to evolve it, you still get an even better physical attacker with good physical defense stats on top of it. And the rest of its stats kind of catch up with it a little bit by that point. But the issue with that is that requires trading the Pokemon, which means if you don't have a second player on standby or a second console with a second game for you to trade to, you're kind of out of luck with that. I tend to ignore that line, even though I do ultimately like using the final line here and again, if only because trade-based Pokemon aren't one I tend to rely on. I know I've done that in prior LPs, namely Fire Red and Soul Silver. I used a trading-based evolution, but just for reasons here in ORAS, I really can't do that. I'll talk more about that later on, though. Right now, time for our next new Pokemon. This is Jigglypuff. Jigglypuff used to be a pure normal type, but as of Gen 6, it is now a normal fairy type. That new typing makes it weak to poison and steel, but completely immune to ghost and dragon, which is really cool. With that said, Jigglypuff's got a really good HP stat, but the rest of its stats aren't really anything to write home about. When you evolve it, if you evolve it, you get an okay mixed attacker out of it, but it really flies in those weaknesses and immunities, in my eyes. It does have some decent abilities, though. It can have Cute Charm, where if an opponent makes physical contact with the move, there's a chance it'll just be infatuated outright. Gen 6 Beyond, it can get the competitive ability, where if any of its stats are lowered by an opponent in some way, its special attack stat is raised by 2 stages, which can build up pretty quickly in some instances. And it has the hidden ability Friend Guard, where in the case it uses an attack that can damage an ally in battle and doubles, it does less damage outright by some percent. Next up, we got our next new Pokemon. This is Gloom. This evolves from Oddish at level 21. Poison grass type, so it's weak to flying, fire, psychic, and ice. Gloom's got an okay special attack stat and some decent defense stats to back it up as well. But you're not using an Oddish line to use a Gloom. You're using it for either the end states, which again, you can either use one stone type on it to get a good special defender, and another stone to get a really good special attacker out of it. And personally, for my tastes, I'd go for the special attacker, but that's just me. Ability-wise, off the top of my head, I think Gloom has the same base ability as Oddish Chlorophyll, where if there's a super sunny weather state going, its speed gets raised by some percent. But it can instead have Stench as its hidden ability, which we've already talked about, I believe, with Grimer earlier on in the LP. Jagged Pass, though, is ultimately one of those Pokemon sub-dungeons where if you're just there for the main plot stuff, you're probably out of here in a minute or two, depending if you get in a battle along the way. But if you're good about avoiding the grass or the trainers along the way, you can be done here in probably less than a minute, honestly, and move right on to our next town. But because I want to get as many items as I can and get as much experience as I can, here we are. With that said, already time for our next new Pokemon. This is Hariyama. This evolves from Makuhita at level 24. Pure fighting type, so it's weak to flying, psychic, and fairy. Hariyama has a great HP stat and a really good physical attack stat. And while its defenses aren't the best, you're here to get this thing in and do some damage quickly, in my eyes. And if memory serves, it has a decent moveset you can learn it with along the way anyway, especially in more modern contexts. This is a decent fighting type. There are fighting types I tend to use more, but I've made good use of the Makuhita into Hariyama line plenty of times in the past, especially playing Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald as a kid. The only reason I tend to not use them too much nowadays and whenever I revisit Hoenn is because since I almost always have a Blaziken with me, I have a fighting type covered. And largely, I'll maybe double up on 1 or 2 types across a game, but that's generally the most it goes. If anything, my playthrough of Scarlet Violet was the rarity in that because across the main campaign and the 2 DLCs, I ended up using a surprising amount of Steel types or Fairy types on accident, which was kind of funny. But hey, they were good Fairy and or Steel types because Tinkaton is nuts and King Gambit can be disgusting in the right instances. Welcome back to Route 112, right near where we first climbed up the top of Mount Chimney using the cable car. With that said, while our next destination is to the west, I'm immediately falling back down these ledges towards where we first entered Route 112 and we used the cable car to get up to Mount Chimney. As not only is there a nugget you can grab along the way, but I can also remember to grab this item I forgot earlier, this guard spec, which I will never use. I just completely forgot to get that before climbing up Mount Chimney, and that's on me. But for now, let's jump cut back to the entrance of Route 112 we just came through, and reach Lavaridge Town, another one of my favorite towns in the game. Dance and soul make power. Soul is the way of karate for me. You understand, yes? No? Oh, why so sad and wretched? You take this and you understand the way of karate of me, fool trainer. For doing that, we get the Swords Dance TM. Swords Dance is to your attack stat, what the Rock Polish TM we got a few moments ago is for your speed stat. It raises your attack stat by 2 stages. And it can be learned by a lot of Pokemon that you would really want on any kind of end-game, post-game, or competitive type teams. It's a very usable move. I don't use it in this LP, but hey, go off if you like it. I feel like one of the few times off the top of my head I actively had a stat boosting move on a Pokemon for a lot of a playthrough was actually back when I played Sword and Shield. I'm mostly reminded of this because I looked back at my team when I was playing through the DLC of that recently, where I had a Corviknight in that playthrough, and in its final moveset that I had probably by, I would assume like the 6th or 5th gym or something like that. It's been a while since I played through that, so I don't remember exactly when it levels it up and learns that. I gave it Hone Claws, which raises the attack and accuracy stat of the Pokemon using it by 1 stage, and Power Trip, which, by some formula I'm probably going to put on screen in a moment, does more damage based on how many times its stats have been raised in that battle. It got ridiculous. I want to say, while it took more setup, it could do potentially the most damage in a single move out of non-Dynamaxed Pokemon on my team. It's just that I took setup, and depending on what I was doing, I didn't exactly always have the opportunity to do that. Worth noting, this Pokemon breeder here in the Pokemon Center will actively sell you either 1 or 12 Moo Moo Milks for a pretty cheap price compared to some other healing items. And given that it heals 100 HP per use, not the worst healing item to buy if you have a bunch of money in spare that you're not actively using, but again, I'm largely saving my money because the way I tend to do healing items in Pokemon games is that I get up until the very end of the game and buy as much of the best healing items in the game as I can, and then just coast on those through whatever I'm doing in whatever kind of post-game. Also notably, Lavaridge has its own little hot springs here. The most that you can do here at the moment is that there's an item, I believe, on the women's side of it. I want to say it may have done something to Friendship in Gen 3, but I think I'm wrong about that, and it was just something I always kind of assumed because it felt like something like one of the massages in later games. But hey, there's an ice heal right here. Neat. But before we access the gym, there's one specific NPC I definitely want to talk to near the hot springs. In specific, they're just south of it near the little sand piles you could have actively walked into in the original Gen 3. It's this old lady. I have here an egg. I'd hoped to hatch it by covering it in the hot sand by the hot springs, but that didn't seem to be enough. I'd heard it would be best if it was kept together with Pokemon and carried. You're a trainer, yes? And your Pokemon radiate vitality. So what say you? Will you take this egg to hatch? Sure. Good. Hope you'll walk plenty with this here egg. This is our first Pokemon egg. The main way you get these is by breeding 2 Pokemon together at the daycare on Route 117. With that said, if you get something from any kind of story event or NPC throughout the game, it hatches into one specific Pokemon depending on the egg. So I know exactly what this egg will be, and I'll hatch it as we go. The big thing about egg hatching is it's entirely based on the amount of steps you take. There's these whole things called egg cycles, which I've never understood the intricacies of myself. I just know the more I walk, it hatches eventually. There are certain abilities, namely like Flame Body, that Slugma can have pretty easily, that actively, I believe, cut the amount of steps you need to walk in half. So I'd recommend if you're going to do any kind of Pokemon breeding with eggs, you actively use that. But for right now, I'm just going to carry this egg with me until it hatches. The other notable thing outside of the gym here in Lavaridge Town is this herb shop, where you can get a charcoal for one thing, which boosts the power of fire-type moves when used as a held item. But the herb shop here sells incredibly efficient healing items at a decent price. The big issue with them is that they actively lower the friendliness of the Pokemon in question you use them on, which in most cases doesn't really matter. It's only really if you're using moves that actively get stronger with higher friendship that it super matters a lot. But if you're also trying to use a certain move that gets higher in strength, the lower a Pokemon's friendliness is, hey, that might come in handy. I don't tend to use it, but it's there if you want to. Again, decently cheap for either a full heal or a high-level potion equivalent. For now, it's on to the Lavaridge Gym, one I had a lot of trouble navigating as a child in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Not so much here, though. Yo, how's it going, Chantabie Kyle? Lavaridge's gym leader Flannery uses fire-type Pokemon. Her passion for Pokemon burns stronger and hotter than a volcano. Don't get too close to her, or you might get burned. Hose her down with water, and then go for it. So, based on that and our general proximity to Mount Chimney, you might be able to tell this is a fire-type gym. With that said, you see a lot more than just fire types here. My memory, there's a good chunk of Metatites, I think a couple of Hariyamas, and while you do see the limited fire types Hoenn does have to offer, be ready with something else just in case. With that said, I think this probably also has the most optional trainers in a gym we've seen up to now, because most of them won't actively proc onto you while you're on the gimmicks here. The way this gym works is that you have these platforms. You step on one on the top floor, you fall down. You step on one on the bottom floor, it shoots you back up. Use that to navigate the mini maze and get to Flannery. I think the big thing that makes this gym easier here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, though, outside of I think the gym trainers being easier to avoid, is that since we have this higher angle camera that you can see forward a little bit, you get a much easier idea of positioning where elevators might lead you to in some cases than you did in the original Ruby Sapphire Emerald, where it was all top down. And while you could probably get some good lead-ins on that, I just find the perspective here makes this a much easier gym in comparison. With that said, it's also, outside of maybe Rustboro Gym, probably one of the more one-to-one ones from the original Gen 3. With that said, we're actually going to show this Ace Trainer here as they have a new Pokemon for us. After we get their Slugma out of the way, they're going to throw out Kecleon. Kecleon, by default, is a pure normal type, meaning it's weak to fighting, immune to ghost. It's got a really good special defense stat and okay physical attack stat, but if you're using a Kecleon, you're using it for its main ability, Color Change, where when it gets hit by a move of a Pokemon it's fighting, its type changes to the type of that move. So say I used a Fire-type move, Kecleon would turn into a Fire-type, making Fire-type moves less effective. There's some setups where you might be able to use a Kecleon to absorb some hits and then lead it into being a defensive tank against whatever you're fighting, but those are pretty hit or miss, so while you might be able to use it well casually in the campaign, I don't really see people tend to use it in endgame type stuff off the top of my head. Worth noting though, its hidden ability got in Gen 5 is probably a little more interesting for a lot of people. It's Protean, which is color change, but for the attacks it uses, so it'll almost always have stab on whatever it's using, which can be pretty useful in some cases, especially casually. Again, just there's probably better Pokemon for your endgame level, post-game type teams, whatever you're doing. What's worth noting though is that off the top of my head, I don't think you actively see that Pokemon in Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald until at least a gym from now, which is kind of interesting. Welcome! No, wait, I mean, Puny Trainer, you've done well to make it this far. Let's see, I'm honored to be serving as the gym leader of... No, I mean, I'm Flannery, and I'm in charge here. You'd better not underestimate me just because I've only been leader a short time. With the skills inherited from my grandfather, I'm gonna demonstrate the hot moves we've honed in this land. Yeah! Well, you come in at an 11, I see. Flannery always starts off with her Slugma. Overheat, Rock Throw, Light Screen, and Sunny Day for its moves, Flame Body for its ability. Sunny Day notably puts up a super sunny weather state, which boosts the power of Fire-type moves by some amount. I forget off the top of my head. It just boosts it pretty well. Notably, I mentioned Flame Body helps with actively hatching Pokemon eggs, but that's just its out-of-battle use. In battle, Pokemon with that ability have a chance of causing the burn status ailment on Pokemon that make physical contact with it. Next up, she's going to throw out her Numel. Simple for its ability, so any status changes you put on it will actively be doubled in either direction. Earth Power, Lava Plume, Amnesia, and Sunny Day for its attacks. This one shouldn't be much of a threat at this point if you have any kind of Water-type Pokemon on your team, let alone anything that can do good damage against ground types. It's her final Pokemon that can cause some issues, but only if you've really drained your party and you have fewer Pokemon at this point. Her ace is her Torkoal. Overheat, Body Slam, Curse, and Sunny Day for its moves, White Smoke for its ability. White Smoke actively prevents any of its stats from being reduced unless it's reduced by its own moves, such as Overheat, which we'll be talking about in a few moments. Torkoal you can actively catch back at the Fiery Path. Pure Fire type, so it is weak to Ground, Rock, and Water. Torkoal's got a nuts physical defense stat, and some okay attack stats to back it up. I've used it plenty. It's a decent Fire type. It's just that if I'm using a Fire type in a generation where Torkoal is available, usually the Fire starter is better anyway, and I'm more likely to have that. Perfectly usable. I just wish it got an evolution at some point because I feel like it's a Pokemon that kind of deserves one at this point, though. I guess what would you do to it? Just make its attack stats slightly better? If anything, it actually might be more interesting to do a regional variant or a convergent evolution type deal with it at some point. But that's a topic for a later day, more than likely. Also, right now, Boomba's trying to learn Counter. That's a really good fighting type move if you know your Pokemon's likely to go second. It'll actively take any of the damage it intakes and throw it back at the enemy doubled, which is really good. Oh, I guess I was trying too hard. I've only recently become a gym leader. I guess I was trying too hard to be someone that I'm not. When I don't act like myself, no wonder Pokemon that battle at my side get confused. Thank you for teaching me that. You deserve this. And we're already at 4 badges. Halfway there, halfway there, halfway there. If you have a Heat badge, all Pokemon up to level 50, even those you get in trades from other people, will obey you completely. And it lets Pokemon use the HM move Strength outside of battle. This is a token of my appreciation. Don't be shy about taking it. And we get the Overheat TM. This is a move I've used pretty decently in the past. Overheat's a Fire-type move that inflicts serious damage on the target, but it also sharply cuts the special attack of the Pokemon using it. It might not be suitable for longer battles. She just summarized what it does completely. It does good damage, but it cuts the special attack of the Pokemon using it by 2 stages every use. In my experience, Overheat works best on a mixed attacker that can use Fire-type moves like Blaziken, where you can use it once or twice at the start of battle so you take advantage of its decent special attack stat, and then rely on its physical attack stat from there on using things like Blaze Kick. But if memory serves, I don't really use it this specific playthrough. Hello again, May! Kyle! Wow, it's a relief to see you in one piece. Oh, well, you know, the last time I saw you was right after battling those Team What's-It people. So I was a bit worried thinking about what might have happened to you after that, Kyle. What? You battled them again after that? And you beat them? You really are something else, Kyle. I mean, you and your team are. I'm impressed by you all. And that pretty stone that's sparkling there, is that the meteorite you got back from them? Oh, that's right. Here. I've been thinking of giving these to you. And now we get the Go Goggles. These are pretty useful for my specific instances. If you put on those Go Goggles, you'll be all set heading into the desert on Route 111. Oh, and isn't that's Lavaridge's gym badge? So you beat Flannery too? I guess you really are training your Pokemon right. Next up we'll be challenging your dad Norman in Petalburg, right? I'm headed to Petalburg's gym next myself. Do you want to go back together? Back to Petalburg? Not quite yet. I have some other things I want to do before we actively head back to Petalburg. Oh yeah? Well, I'll still be here in Lavaridge for a while, so find me if you think you'd like a little company on the road after all. Another little fast travel point, which honestly I think is a little more useful even than the one back to Mauville, if only because getting back to Petalburg from Lavaridge is a little more tedious, even though it takes about as long as getting back to Mauville from Val Arbor. For right now, I want to head back into the Fiery Path, because now that we have Flannery's gym badge, we can now use the strength move I put onto Boombar earlier in the LP to actively push these rocks. Oh, hi, Aaron. Oh. Hey, Fred, my new pal. You been doing good? I'm doing great, of course. I'm totally pumped about the secret spot I discovered here. You want to see it too? It's right back there, past that big boulder behind me. A secret spot protected by a boulder like that has got to be full of adventure. And here, have a little gift from me since I'm in such a fine mood today. And we get the Nature Power TM. This is a move I find very interesting, if not exactly something I like to use overall. That move, though, will change its effect based on where you are. And more important, doesn't it have an awesome name? Well, guess it's time for me to be off looking for another location for a secret base. I hate to say goodbye, but this is it for today, pal. If you want to see me again, come by the Secret Base Guild in Fortree. So the way Nature Power works is dependent on the environment you use it in, as in like what the background is in battle. It uses the equivalent of a different move related to that type. For instance, in most multiplayer battles, it's gonna, I believe, end up using Swift, which is a low power move that never misses. From there, it can do different things in sandy areas, in caves, on mountains, in different types of grass and all that. I'll probably put the list of the moves it can do on screen as I'm talking about this, because it's a very variable move, but that means it's also really dependent on where you are in the game if you like using it or not. I tend to not use it because of that, though, because I like my moves to be pretty fixed in what they can do, which is exactly why I tend not to use it, even though I do like the idea of it. Geomancers can be cool in Final Fantasy, but only sometimes, for instance. Also, we get the TM for Toxic over here, which I believe I've talked about what Toxic does already in the LP, but in case I haven't, it's the poison status ailment, but stronger, whereas the poison status ailment ticks away a certain amount of the enemy's HP every turn. Toxic increases the amount of HP it ticks down every turn, meaning you have a much stricter time limit in the case the Pokemon that has it is in battle for long periods. Also, we get a Firestone there. You can use that to evolve certain Pokemon that might need it. I don't use it, but hey, if you need a Pokemon that needs a Firestone, you might as well grab that one for free. So now I'm back at Rydal Cycles trading my bike in again, this time to get the Mach Bike, because it's time for us to access an area we first saw technically several parts ago, but we needed the Go Goggles from May that we just got to access. Namely, back here at Route 111, we can now enter the desert area between the two chunks of it. The desert here has the Sandstorm status going constantly in battle, so Pokemon that aren't ground, rock, or steel type off the top of my head will constantly take chip damage. The reason I'm coming here is because not only is there a lot of items and Pokemon trainers I can fight, but also the next member of my team can only really be caught here in the Hoenn region. But first, it's time for once again another new Pokemon. This is Sandslash. This evolves from Sandshrew at level 22. Pure ground type here in the Hoenn region, so it is weak to water, grass, and ice, but immune to electric. Sandslash has a really good physical attack stat and a really good physical defense stat. I've used one in a prior Pokemon LP for that exact reason. It's just a really solid monotype Pokemon. Are there ground types with subtypes I might look at more and be like, I'll probably use that instead? Yeah. But anytime I see a Sandshrew, I'm always like, maybe I'll use one, because I like using it enough. As long as it falls into what I'm already building into with my team, or it falls into my only 2 of prior generation Pokemon per team setup, hey, why not have at it in my eyes? If you want a ground type for your team, you could do a lot worse than most of the ones you can find here on Route 111. I like most of the ones you can find here a lot. Also, I'm going to make sure I go up and Mach Bike up here and talk to the Hex Maniac we're going to see, because it's pretty important for something way, way later in the LP. How did you manage to climb your way up here? Did you use a strange power like me? You rode a Mach Bike up here with some strange power? Do you think I could ride one too? This ties into a very long-term side quest, where if you talk to 3 specific NPCs across the game that are in areas that need the bike to reach by and large, you'll get a decent reward out of it. Next up though, time for our next new fighting type Pokemon. This is Machoke, pure fighting type, so it's weak to flying, psychic, and fairy. Machoke's got a really good physical attack stat and some good HP and physical defense to back it up. It's a pretty box standard fighting type, good physical learn stat overall. But the issue is, like with Graveler, if you want to get the best form of this Pokemon, you need to actively trade it to evolve it again. Like I mentioned when we first saw Machop, if you trade a Machoke, you get an insane physical attacker out of it. It just requires having someone else on standby to do that with. Which, I will say, I talk about that a lot as if not everyone's going to have it. It's a lot more common nowadays, I'd say, especially given the advent of the modern internet culture and all that, to find ways to trade with people. Heck, if memory serves, with the most recent Pokemon games pretty consistently, there's usually a specific link code you can connect to that people will use to trade one Pokemon for another very specifically, in the case they're doing like trade evolutions and all that. And if you're trying to either complete your Pokedex or actively get that trading evolution, it's really handy for that. The biggest issue with the Route 111 desert in my eyes is that it's surprisingly wide and there's a lot of hidden items here, even compared to some of the other areas. Worth noting, any of the yellow sand is effectively grass for this area. You'll run into wild Pokemon there, as well as in the sunken in areas, I believe. You may notice those two specific rocks up there. I'm going to grab those in a moment. Those are pretty important, albeit they moved their location from where they were in the original Gen 3. These are our fossils. The root fossil and the claw fossil. When you grab one, the other sinks into the desert and you cannot get it again. And I believe Emerald, past a certain point in post-game, the other one would spawn in at the Fossil Maniac's house back west of Falarbor Town. But that's not the case here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, I believe, off the top of my memory. Depending on what you want, though, you're going to want one or the other. Just to tell you, the root fossil eventually becomes a rock grass type, which means it's weak to fighting bugs, steel, and ice, and has a really good defensive stat set. Meanwhile, the claw fossil becomes a rock bug type, meaning it is weak to rock, steel, and water, with a really good physical attack stat and good physical defense stat on top of that. Personally, for my use cases, I prefer to actively get the claw fossil, if only because I've actively used that Pokemon in a couple teams over the years, and I like its moveset overall. But I'll talk more about the Pokemon in specific when I actively revive the claw fossil I just got. And thankfully, you get these fossils early enough in their respective campaign that they're honestly very usable in most teams. I know a lot of people that actively do love using the root fossils and state Pokemon as well. And if you want to go revive them, just head back to Devon Corporation at Rustboro and talk to the guy on the second floor. The item that specific NPC just gave us is honestly really interesting. The safety goggles. What those do is that they make the Pokemon holding it immune to any of the powder or spar type moves like poison powder and all that, so it makes them immune to a lot of moves that can cause status ailments, as well as damage from specifically the sandstorm or hail weather types, which can go a long way, honestly, in very specific instances. Next new Pokemon is one you can actively catch on this route. This is Baltoy. This is a ground psychic type with Levitate specifically. So it's weak to bug, ghost, water, grass, ice, and dark, but immune to ground and electric. Baltoy's got some decent special defense on the whole, but not a lot to write home about otherwise in its base stat. I think its learn set's okay. But when it eventually evolves, you get a pretty good mixed defender on top of it. So if you're looking for something to potentially tank some potential moves, it can go a long way, but it's far from my favorite ground or psychic type, although I like the designs of both Pokemon on the whole. From here, there's really only 3 other things to note I want to get done here in this desert. For one thing, there's a TM I want to grab on basically the very southeastern tip of it. There's a little landmark I want to make note of along the way, and then I actually want to catch my next team member here. And if you've noticed how highly I talked of a specific Pokemon earlier in the LP, you probably have a good idea who it might be already. Down here is the TM for Sandstorm, which does the exact weather status we see here in the desert, which chips away at Pokemon that aren't the types I mentioned earlier. The second note is this little rock structure right here. Just keep that in mind for way later in the LP. It's kind of important. I won't lie though, if there's any change I'm surprised they didn't keep from Emerald here in Route 111's deserts. It's how the fossils were changed for Emerald. Namely, they were just out in the sand like they are here in Ruby and Sapphire, but in Emerald they added a little tower that sinks into the sand after you grab one, which I think is a lot more visually interesting, and plus it makes it obvious that the fossils are there. I remember in Ruby Sapphire, and especially here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, just kind of walking past the fossils at first because they didn't register to me as items I could pick up. Them being in that tower went a long way to make them actively feel more important. So now it's time for us to find the Pokemon I want for my team here. And while we're about to catch this Cacnea, it's actively not the Cacnea. I'm mostly catching this just to name it after the friend who really loves this Pokemon because it's one of their overall favorites, just because, hey, they might be watching and, well, hey, Anthem, hope you're doing well. Off the top of my head, the Pokemon I'm actively looking for here isn't the rarest, but that's just because of the 4 Pokemon here in the desert. 3 of them, I think, are a 20% chance, and Sandshoes are about a 40 or something like that from what I remember looking at the encounter rates while I was actively recording the footage. Cacnea, the cactus Pokemon. Surprising, I know. The more arid and harsh the environment, the more pretty and fragrant a flower cacnea grows. This Pokemon battles by wildly swinging its thorny arms. Adorable. Welcome to the team of sorts, Anthem. Over to the box with ye. The Pokemon I'm actively here for is, of course, a Trapinch. I talked about how much I love this Pokemon and its high attack as you go, and now that we can actually catch one, I want one because it makes for a very good end game Pokemon for your team. I want to say I was looking for this one for about 5-6 minutes or something like that. I think I actively ran to like 2 or 3 along the way even, and I ended up taking out 1 or 2 of them just on accident. Just because I wasn't looking at the screen too actively and I was just mashing the A button, which very easy to do here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire because of the text scrolling speed, especially if you have the fast setting selected. Trapinch, the Ant Pit Pokemon. Trapinch is a patient hunter. It digs an inescapable pit in a desert and waits for its prey to come tumbling down. This Pokemon can go a whole week without access to any water. Neat! Welcome to the team, good ol' Kenny. With that said, I do have to go get Kenny for my team, but that's not the furthest walk overall. But with that, really, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 13, if memory serves, not only are we going after our dear old dad back in Petalburg, but we're going to also take care of some other odds and ends across Hoenn that we can take care of at this point. See you guys then.